we went ahead and generated our top 25. So we've got that ready. Let's go ahead and pull that sucker up. And if you're watching this either live right now or you're watching the clipped version of this later, give us a thumbs up. Give us a comment. Where did we go wrong here? What did you think about week 12? And I we just put the thing up, and there's Mr. Quentin, the resident Texas fan. How you doing, Mr. Quentin? Um, Texas is going to have just as good a shot as anybody if they can win this next couple of games here. Let's go through this. Tied, I guess, at number 24 is Utah and Toledo. Toledo's had a good year. Go check them out. We're not going to talk a bunch of Toledo here. 0 Toledo fans to be found, but they've had a good year. Utah, look, they just got smoked by Arizona, but I like Utah. I'm sorry. This is a decent football team. They're not good offensively, and I totally understand that. But overall, it's a decent football team. Liberty, undefeated. They got to be in there, right? Iowa wins again. They're winning the Big Ten West. Cry about it. Nobody wants to see the Big Ten East champion against the Big Ten West champion, but the Big Ten is slow to have those divisions taken away, just like the SEC. This is where we're at. They still have divisions, and one side is super weak, and one side is pretty good. So we're going to see a donkey stomping there in Indianapolis. And then we got Clemson coming in at 21. I don't listen to Dabo a whole lot, but he told me to buy stock in Clemson a couple weeks ago, didn't he? Yeah. And they are looking better. Yep. They are definitely looking better. There were times this year I held on to the sentiment that Clemson had a good defense throughout the whole thing, but it was hard at certain times. They're starting to look more like the Clemson defense that we've come to know. They've kind of grown up throughout the year, starting to play better. So Clemson is on that bottom rung of the top 25, and I think they deserve it. Let's quickly move through this. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, we see Clemson. We see that orange paw print for the first time, I think, since like week 3. They were somewhere in the top 10, if I'm not mistaken, in our top 25, at least top 15, just to open the season. And we've been pretty low on them, really from the get go. But yeah, they're starting to win us back here a little bit. I'll stop shy of saying we're a Clemson show, but but they've done some things nicely, and winning against UNC is not easy to do. UNC did a lot to lose that game. A lot of I think they had 2 goal line fumbles from Hampton, who still went on to rush for 180 yards in that game. But credit Clemson and Dabo, for what they've been able to do. Iowa, they're a 1-loss team. Like they've got to be in. So that's kind of where they're at. The under hit in their game again this week, at I think it was at 29 points, and they scored 28 or something. And the over under, it was that was pretty funny to see. I almost bet the under in that game as well, but decided not to. Liberty and Toledo are the two that are there just based on their record in a way. And then Utah is that team that just won't go away. They just will not be pushed out of the top 25. Tough pesky schedule. Yeah, they're very pesky, and a tough schedule for them. Tough break on the schedule this year, but they're a gritty team. Bryson Barnes threw over 50 times in that game. I think he had 55 pass attempts or something like that, which is, more than, I think that's double his season high for any game. But they were playing behind against a tough Arizona squad. So, but yeah, you mentioned it. Not much on offense. They got toasted in some ways on defense against Arizona, but still in that top 25. So let's move on to the next 5.
I'll start at tied at 18 there. We got a 3-way tie. So we got Oklahoma State, Notre Dame, and Tulane tied at 18. And I felt pretty good about that, considering the fact that I don't know who would win in those. If there was a round robin of those teams. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure who would win that, but Tulane's been a pretty good team. Only loss they've got this year is to Ole Miss, and they didn't have their starting quarterback in that game. Otherwise, I think they win that game.
Yeah.
Kansas State wins again. They don't cover, but they seem to be a team that has trended in the correct direction as the year has went on. They lost some players to the NFL and players moving on and things. So it was a turn the page type of thing to start the year for Kansas State in a lot of ways, especially defensively. Seems like they're getting that figured out as the year goes on, and they're just praying. They're just praying that there's a couple of Big 12 losses there. And then Arizona, a team that I really like, they're just balanced. This is a balanced team. They run the football decent. They throw the football decent. They play some defense. I like this Arizona team as they mollywopped Utah this past week, which is, hey, we've seen Utah hang tough with a lot of teams this year, and Arizona handled them with a very, very decisive first half there and put Utah in a really, really tough spot as they are not built to come back. What do you think about this run?
Yeah, I think starting with Oklahoma State, I'm just really looking forward to seeing them. Hopefully, it looks like probably gonna face the Longhorns in the Big 12 championship, and they'll be on upset alert there. The Longhorns will. So that's got to be the game that Gundy's circling and saying, we got to have our best game of the year in order to win that, and they certainly do. Notre Dame's just kind of there. They're just kind of there, in general, in the top 25 and in college football as a whole. They don't do a whole lot to warrant my attention in some ways. And you mentioned Tulane. I'm not going to spend too much time on them. Then you got the two Wildcat teams up top with Kansas State and Arizona. Kansas State's a really good team. I think that would actually be a really good matchup. Kansas State versus Arizona. That'd be a fun one to see in a bowl game matchup or something. But two teams that play kind of similar football and have had similar seasons in a sense that they at the beginning of the year weren't playing their best football, and now they are, and now they look really good. So very similar in what they do there, and maybe Arizona, I give them the edge offensively, but the Wildcats and their defense have been really stingy as well. So, yeah.
Let's go to the next rung here. LSU at 15, they took care of Georgia State. Kind of struggled a little bit at first, which Georgia State's got some players. Okay, they're not like horrible or anything. LSU doesn't have much to play for at this point, but they take care of business, and that offense is obviously the straw that stirs the drink for that team. As they sit at 15. Number 14, Oregon State. We're not going to penalize the Beavers a whole lot for a 2-point loss to a top 3 team as far as we're concerned. They, they've obviously got their chinks in their armor. But, it's something I was actually thinking about yesterday. For selfish reasons and dramatic reasons, I would love to see Oklahoma and USC in a bowl game. I don't think that's going to happen. Oklahoma and Oregon State would be one hell of a matchup in a bowl game. I would love to see that. And Oklahoma is our 13th team there. I just think that would be an awesome, awesome game. A couple different styles. I think that game would come down to the end. And number 12, Penn State, and number 11, Ole Miss. This is another matchup that I would really like to see. I'd love to see those two teams face off in a bowl game. Penn State, we know what their flaws are. They have trouble stretching the field. It's pretty obvious. And Ole Miss doesn't have a defense. I mean, their defense is pretty porous. Has been for a good portion of the year. What do you think about this run? And I think I should be the one in charge of the bowl game matchups. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely.
First and Long should control that. I'm
Yeah.
just throwing that idea out there.
We're getting into that season, right, where we're playing bowl matchup prediction, and that's a really fun season of talking football. I can't wait to see what the matchups look like.
Imagine if it was a 12-team playoff this year.
Oh, I know. And you know, and if you imagine that, it's not. It's funny because they keep expanding the playoffs, and I don't want to get too much on a tangent here, but they keep expanding the playoffs and expanding the playoffs. Well, if you expand to a 12-team playoff, guess who's still in this year? Alabama. At this point in the stage, Alabama would still be in, right?
Mm-hmm.
At 4 teams, assuming that Georgia beats Alabama, Alabama's not in, and you'd see a Georgia versus another conference team, right?
Right.
But if Alabama's in, there's a chance that you would see another SEC matchup, because Alabama is playing really good football right now, and a lot of people would argue that Alabama might be the second best team in the country as of right now. So I don't know, just something. I don't want to get too far off topic, but we'll definitely be breaking that down a little bit further, moving forward.
Oh, of course, and we're going to actually give you guys our playoff predictor here in just a minute. As me and Mason had the same teams, maybe a little different order, but we've got the same playoff teams that we're thinking are going to make it at this point. But yeah, be careful what you wish for,
right?
Because this 12-team playoff, I mean, you're talking about Ole Miss and Penn State being in there. Who raise your hand if you think Ole Miss and Penn State even have a remote chance of being a playoff game? Nobody's going to raise their hand to that.
Well, and you'd probably have a Tulane in there, instead of Penn State, Yeah. That'd be even worse. We saw Ole Miss beat Tulane, but again, without their starting quarterback.
Right, absolutely. So it's a be careful what you wish for type of thing. I think the 14 playoff was good. I think a 6 would have been better. But you know what? We're not in charge of that, even though we should be. So that's something to think about. Maybe we should be in charge. Number 10, the Mizzou Tigers. They took care of Florida, but not in no decisive fashion. Boy, this thing came down to the end. But Missouri's kind of been through the gauntlet here at the end. So I can kind of understand that a little bit. Man, those Missouri fans were about ready to shed a tear, man. They did not think they had a chance in this one, and I certainly didn't either. I jumped off the couch whenever they hit that 4th and 17. I couldn't believe it. Louisville, the bird with teeth, they clinched their spot in the ACC championship. Looked pretty good doing it. Jack Plummer had a great day. They're looking better by the minute. The more I think about that ACC championship matchup, Alabama been looking good. Played absolutely nobody this weekend and looked good. They have harder practice days than the game they had this past Saturday. So I'm not going to put too much in that. My thoughts are still the same on Alabama. I think they're a good team. Tied at number 6, Texas Longhorns and the Florida State Seminoles. If these two teams were to play today, I'd take Texas for sure, especially considering what we just saw. I think Quinn Ewers has got to keep working on that shoulder, man. And I think that's going to be key. And I think this offensive line needs to continue to get better and patch up some things, because I saw Iowa State penetrating on some things that they had no business competing with a Texas Longhorns team. So, hey, hat off to Iowa State. They played really hard, but we've seen some close games with Texas here lately, and I'm wanting to see that dominant Texas maybe one more time at least before the conference championship game. And then Florida State, we talked about the injury that happened to Jordan Travis, just absolutely devastating. Really, really hate to see that. As a college football fan, you don't want to see teams not at their best. You want to see the best versions of all these teams, and we're not going to get that at this point with Florida State. I can confidently tell you that right now.
No.
So very interesting, the comings and goings here in the top 10 and what happened in week 12. What's your thoughts on this rung? And we'll get into the really what's the top 4, because we had 2 tied at number 4.
Yeah, not a whole lot of movement in our top 10 as a whole. A little bit of a mix-up, I guess, with Oregon kind of leapfrogging Florida State in this one. You mentioned Florida State now, without their starting quarterback, every game moving forward now, Florida State fans have an excuse to lose, right? And so, and I hate that for them in a sense that their quarterback's not going to be at or their team's not at their full strength with their quarterback missing. But at the same time, I've been saying from the really ever since there were only 5 undefeated teams remaining that Florida State was the worst of the bunch. So I think that they were bound to lose regardless. But now you kind of give Florida State and Mike Norvell an out in saying that they didn't have their best quarterback, So that is what it is. And maybe they continue to win. Florida State fans can certainly tell us, what they think that the rest of the season will look like for them and other, fans of other college football teams. Let us know what you think the outlook is like for the Florida State Seminoles now. But, moving on to Texas, I think that maybe Quinn Ewers was rushed back. I think that they realized that they had some holes with Murphy. So now, now we're seeing him play at probably about 70%. I don't think he's really that close to being 100%. So we'll see his play continue to tick up as we move on. I'm excited to see that. And then moving on to Alabama, probably playing the best football out of the bunch here and looking like they were supposed to look all season. We're seeing the most talented team in college football, and they're starting to play a little bit like that. So they're on a crash course for Georgia in a couple of weeks, and college football as a whole just cannot wait for this game. It's going to be outstanding. And then you've got Louisville, who played really well. I thought against Miami, that was definitely a game that they could have lost. And Louisville's just been a really consistent team, and you don't see that coming out of the ACC that often. You see an ACC team like Clemson, dropping a game here and there. And Louisville's just been steady Eddie. They had the one bad loss to Pitt, and outside of that, I think they've been playing really consistent football, which shows a very disciplined team, and I think that that's been really a bright spot. Missouri, I'll just real quick. I mean, they escape, this past week and defeat Florida in a really, really good matchup. Another Harrison Mevis thicker kicker kick to win it, and it was really a fun game to watch. They were on the rope several times. Also, had Etienne not stepped out of bounds, then they take a little bit more time off the clock, and maybe Missouri never gets that opportunity to drive late, so a little bit of mismanagement of the clock on Florida's part, late in that game. But and it also kind of, Florida, not to spend too much time on them, but they're in crunch time now, right? They needed one of these next 2 wins and had a really good opportunity. Now they got to face Florida State and play an upset at home, which helps them out a lot. But that's definitely a game to watch, next week. But let's get into the top 5, man.
Tied at number 4, we have got the Oregon Ducks and the Michigan Wolverines. Oregon, I think, is playing some of the best football in the country right now. I think Bo Nix has been really good, but Oregon kills the teams they're supposed to kill. So I really like what I see. But if you look at the teams that they've killed Arizona State's not no good team, man. They beat them 49-7, and that's very decisive, and that's all you can do against a team like that. It's just, they could have probably beat them 100-0 if they wanted to, but they're not going to be playing another Arizona State for the rest of the year. So with the competition level on an uptick, I'm interested to see how Oregon handles that and how Bo Nix handles it when he inevitably eventually gets pressure. We've seen that throughout his career, and that's every quarterback. Most quarterbacks' numbers drop when they're under pressure. But I'm interested to see how this team reacts to that. I can't wait to see that Oregon-Washington matchup. Can't wait to see if Muhammad can match up with Troy Franklin. That's going to be a matchup to watch.
Yeah.
Michigan, I've kind of shared my thoughts on them earlier today whenever we did our reaction show earlier today. And I think Michigan is a team that they were due for a distracting uh, game, a distracting week, and I think they were very distracted. And I think they're looking ahead to Ohio State, which I think is understandable, but almost didn't escape with the win out there in Maryland, and that was kind of discouraging to see. I'm concerned about the downfield passing game with this team, when especially whenever they face some serious competition if they make it to the playoff, much less the game that's coming up this week. So can't wait to see them play Ohio State, who's our number 2 team. Um, Ditto with them, honestly. I want to see how they respond to a really good Michigan front seven, and I want to see if those receivers and Kyle McCord can manage to get the ball over the top and stretch the field. That's really the unique unit in this game is that wide receiver core for Ohio State. Can't wait to break that one down more this week. Washington, they stay at number 3. We've had them at number 3. They deserve to be at number 3. Very gutty win that they had this past weekend. I'm not worried about them only winning by 2 at all. That was just a game that they needed. They weren't even favored. And so you could say that they defied the odds to win that game, and definitely defied, Mother Nature, and threw the ball in a monsoon. So I thought that was very, very impressive. Got stops when they needed to, ran the ball good enough to win this game. And then we talked about Georgia earlier today as well in our reaction video. Georgia took care of Tennessee like it was no problem. I mean, it wasn't an issue. We kind of talked about Carson Beck going on the road only for the second time, with the SEC, stadiums. This was a really big one. This was a big stage. A lot of people watching this game, and I mean, Carson Beck just tore it up. 24 of 30, right around 300 yards. Totally tore it up. And Georgia proves again they're not relying on one player. There's not one player on this team that they're relying on. So it's a very good cast of players that Georgia's got, and I think they're playing the best ball in the country right now. What do you think about this top group?
Yeah, I like that Oregon has crept up into our top 5. Power rating wise, I think that they're a top 4 team right now. And, look, they've got the one loss to the number 3 team in the country, and that's it. And they really should have won that game, I think, in a lot of ways, not taking anything away from the Huskies. But
If they don't turn the ball over 3 times, they probably do win. And if they don't
right.
make boneheaded coaching decisions, they probably do win.
Yeah, I think they definitely win. But we'll get to see that rematch, thankfully, in a neutral site, and we'll see kind of what comes of that. Michigan struggled for the first time this year, struggled with a Maryland team on the road, and really had opportunities to lose this game, and credit to them, they found a way to win it. I'm not going to take too much away from Michigan for playing in a tough spot, in sort of a sandwich game, is a trap game if I've ever seen one, right? So they found a way to win it, but nothing on offense really going for them in that game against Maryland, which is pretty concerning, especially from a passing perspective. They're definitely going to have to show me more on offense this coming week against Ohio State to be able to win that game. And then Washington, you mentioned it, gritty performance against Oregon State. Could have lost that game very easily. They were shut down in the second half offensively, missed one field goal, but ultimately just weren't really driving. So I'd like to see them be a little bit more consistent on the offensive side of the ball. But I thought that their defense made some very opportunistic stops and turnovers when they needed them. And then Ohio State, I'm seeing a little bit more from them on offense. I wish I could see more out of Kyle McCord, especially with those weapons he has in the wide receiver room, which is possibly the best unit in all of the country of any unit. So I think that if he can take another step forward this week against Michigan, then they become a legitimate playoff contender and championship, winning team. that's what I'm waiting to see. Their defense, look, they've got it. We've been saying for years now, if Ohio State just had a top 20 defense, then they would win the national championship. Well, you got it, and now all of a sudden you're getting less play from your offense. So I'm continuing to watch that offense and seeing how it progresses. That we're running out of time, right? So they've got to kind of put it up this week against Michigan. And number one, Georgia, no real surprises there. They played like the number one team in the country this week. They just won their 28th game in a row, I believe. So they've got a chance to win this week against Georgia Tech, and then going up against Alabama in the SEC championship to make it 30. And they're aiming to do that. So, but that's all I got for you.
Flash us that college football playoff predictor we've got going on. We're going to give you our top 4 teams. Oh, you've already got it up. Bam. This is where we're at. This is what I'm thinking is going on. This is what Mason's thinking is going on. We're simpatico here. All right. We are together as one, first and long team. I mean, we like Ohio State right now. We think that I think they stand a really good chance this year. Ryan Day has taken a totally different approach to this football team, I feel like, than what they have. And in the past, that is. They can run the ball. They can play defense. That's what it's going to take. We talked about Michigan. Ohio State was more built to win playoff games and things like that. They were a high-powered offense, serviceable defense. It was better last year than it had been years prior. This year is really, really good. Michigan was built to win the Big Ten. Well, now I feel like as the year has progressed and we've seen more of Ohio State, they're almost built like a Michigan. It's kind of weird how that's worked out, but I think it's by design. I think it's I think that it's the step in the right direction for them to win the Big Ten and get to where they want to go. So, and then we like Oregon over Texas. We both feel as of right now, and I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout or anything, but we feel like Oregon has got the edge at Pac-12 championship game. And the edge is that defense. Now, I saw some things out of that defense from Washington that I really like this week. And I'm not, necessarily saying that Washington can't win. They've already beat them once. Anything can happen in a football game. But I think if Oregon doesn't turn the ball over in that game, I think that, and not to mention the boneheaded going for 2 here, going for 4th down here. I thought those were very dumb decisions. Football Jesus, thank you so much for commenting and watching the video. We do appreciate it. You guys have to stop assuming Oregon will beat Washington. People have said that for the last 3 weeks, that I think he's saying that we will lose, and they keep winning. Beware. Hey, look, I bet on Oregon State this weekend, and I lost. So I've already come on here and said that, and it was a 2-point game. I don't think I was necessarily barking up the wrong tree. And Oregon's look really good. It's not a guaranteed thing that they're going to beat Washington, but we gotta call it like we see it. And look, I predicted Washington to go to the playoff in the preseason. So if there was any kind of lean, it would have been to Washington. But I've just seen what I've seen, and I know what Dan Lanning is. This offense is really good. Dan Lanning is a defensive-minded coach. Yeah, he's like a perfect fit for Oregon and what they need to do to win the Pac-12 in Vegas that first weekend in December. And I believe that one's on a Friday night. I cannot wait to watch it. It's going to be a good game. Oregon ain't going to blow nobody out. Washington's going to have chances to win this football game and prove everybody wrong. And if Washington does go and beat Oregon, they may even go up to like the number 2 spot or something. It's very, very possible. And we watched TCU do this last year. I bet against TCU 3 or 4 times last year, and they kept winning. So it's not impossible, but as of right now, that's kind of where we both sit. We've talked about this before we got on air because we knew this would come up. So Yeah, I appreciate you commenting, and best of luck to Washington. Hey, it would prove me right, and I would be one of the only people that picked Washington to go to the playoff. Okay, so for that reason right there, I'm rooting for Washington. Okay, seriously, I really am. So we'll see what happens, man. That game is highly anticipated, as you can see by this comment here. People are fired up already for these conference championship games, Mason.
Yeah, and I think what you have to remember, Jesus, is that we we have Washington ahead of Oregon. I don't know if you were around for our top 25 breakdown, but we do think that. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. No,
Sweet
but
baby Jesus. Woo!
we do think that Washington is ahead of Oregon right now in our rankings. This is just a playoff prediction, that we're giving you right now. We're not assuming that Oregon beats Washington, but we are predicting it, right? And that's kind of where we're at right now. I think it's going to be a really good game and a close game.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
based
yeah.
on what we saw in that head-to-head matchup, and based on what we've seen from each team, I still give Oregon the slight edge, although I think that Washington is playing the best football we've seen from them all year. And you can't take that away from them. They have defied, people talking about them, but we've had Washington at 3 for 8 weeks now, it seems like. We've been higher on Washington than most other channels and the national media as a whole. And we kind of had to come off of that train a little bit when they battled the flu. We didn't realize how much of an impact that really made on them and their performance. But now we see them peaking. The issue is I also see the Ducks peaking at the same time. And I like their weapons a little bit more right now on the offense. And I think that they have I'll say a much better defense than Washington. Washington's just been able to kind of get big plays when they need them. So, but definitely a deserving team to be in the playoffs should they beat Oregon. Absolutely. And I think especially if Michigan were to beat Ohio State, I would put, if Washington beats Oregon, Washington gets the number 2 slot, in my opinion. I don't, if Ohio State wins, then maybe the head to head, I'd have to break it down. But maybe they would stay in at number 2, but that's an interesting comparison that we can save for another day.
Yeah. I also want to say, I thought McMillan was going to be back for Washington, and he still doesn't look right. So I'm not sure where that's. I feel like they need him really to beat Oregon. It's that close of a margin. You need all your weapons in this game, and that goes for Oregon too. Oregon needs every weapon in the reservoir there to beat Washington. So and Dan Lanning can't be making some dumbass decisions like he did the first go round in this game. It was kind of disappointing, but something you see out of first year coaches. And Kalen DeBoer, I thought did on the other end of that, like this past weekend, Washington did some things on offense that I really liked. They know how to line up and get the matchups they want, and it's impressive the formation and 4 wide receivers out here to the right and throwing 1 out here to the left. Well, guess what? Somebody's got to cover these 4, and then that leaves number 1 over here all by himself on an island with a corner, and he's going to win that battle. I mean, he's just going to win that battle. Like, it's not 50-50 balls. It's like 70-30. Like, he's if he's one-on-one with somebody, you throw it to him. And so this Washington team continues to be 1 play away.